Hello, my name is Tosca Bruno van Vijwijken with the Transnational NGO Leadership Institute. The Institute was launched just this month, September, by the Maxwell School, and it's a leadership preparedness program geared towards transnational NGO leaders who are currently working just underneath the top level at the second tier of responsibility in their organizations who wish to prepare themselves for top leadership. It also tries to serve organizations mindful about securing a successful leadership succession in their organization, which is often actually quite problematic in the civil society sector. Today I'm undertaking a brief interview with Inge Wallage. She's a participant at the Institute, and Inge is the Director of Communications at Greenpeace, an NGO that many of us are familiar with. Thanks for allowing us to interview you today. Tell us, for those of us who don't know Greenpeace, what is the nature and mission of your organization?
Actually, I think the name says it all, Greenpeace. So what we're aiming for is really a green and sustainable, peaceful world for current generations and generations to come. Mm-hmm. And the way we define it is that we have a couple of different campaigns that address that overall mission, mm-hmm. Of which climate and energy, deforestation, our oceans campaign, sustainable agriculture and toxics are the key ones.
Just to follow up for a moment, what is for you the relationship between green and peace?
We actually believe that we can't have a green future without it being peaceful. So for us it's really about environmental justice, climate justice that goes together with social justice.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us how you personally got involved in transnational activism and how you over time became a leader in this case, Greenpeace? You have quite an interesting career background.
So it depends on how you would define activist, I guess.
Yeah.
I could argue I've been an activist at heart, and I know that people around me describe me in that way. So I've really been in the communications profession all my time, and really to be, if you really stand for something, I've always voiced that very, very clearly. So there's an activist nature in that, if you like. However, I've indeed been in the private sector for around 18 years when I made the leap, a great transition for myself, to join Greenpeace 2.5 years ago. And that was really when I became involved at the transnational level. I work for Greenpeace International, and that's where the true activist in me could find her home and really apply it.
You're currently a Director of Communications. How do you see at some point in the future the leadership leap that you are starting to prepare yourself for?
So I think the way I have grown in my career has really been through the functional path. And I see my leap that it really becomes far more general. I think I'm on that journey. So I have grown beyond my communication function as such. And being a member of the senior management team allows me that. And there's an expectation that as a member of the senior management team, you go beyond your functional areas.
Yeah.
And that's really something that I see as needing to prepare for that next step. And the next step could be various. It could be within the organization, could be outside of that organization. And I guess having been in communications and being communications director, I think communications is rather fundamental to the work that we do.
Yeah.
So I think that gives me a pretty good foundation. But I definitely need to, having come from the private sector, having made the transition to this new sector, that's where I still need to make a leap, understand the sector better. And then further, because we know that if you really are going to be the main figurehead, that's going to mean some more. And for me, it's to identify the gaps. What do I need to work on more to really be able to step in that role?
Okay. And what distinguishes top leaders in the NGO sector that you have now become familiar with from leaders who work at your level of senior management team leader? What's the distinction in what one needs to do and be?
You know, I actually believe it depends on where you are and in what type of organization and whether you are working with a participatory leader. So if your CEO or your president works together a lot with his or her management team, then the leap is probably going to be less than when you work with a leader which is more on a solitary basis and is a different role for his senior management team. So I think that first of all that makes quite a difference. I think I've had the beautiful example of having been in senior management teams where there's been participatory leaders. Mm-hmm. So I've had an opportunity to already be more responsible in certain areas that you might not just think as a senior management team member.
Yeah.
However, ultimately, the responsibility of that role when you are the key figurehead, mm-hmm. it stops with you.
Yeah.
So when there are unclear situations, which I think we often will be at, and there is some division or there is some unclarity as to where you need to go, that's what the leader should really do. And then to identify with whom you need to take the discussion, how you can consult those that matter, and to make sure that you pave your way forward and you do that timely.
Yeah.
I think that's a real key difference when you're in that role.
Interesting. What did you expect to gain when you decided to attend the Leadership Institute?
As I said, having come from a different sector, one of my goals definitely was to understand this sector better, mm-hmm. both through what you would be offering here at the Institute as well as the participants, and that's definitely been the case. Secondly is to step outside of yourself and to be cognizant of behaviors and what it means to be a leader and what leadership styles are and how do you think and how do you act and what is your default mechanism in terms of how you behave as a leader and not. So to be very cognizant of yourself. Mm-hmm. And again, I think that's really been delivered. Do
you think you've also been enabled to be more cognizant of the leadership styles of the people around you who are your most internal important stakeholders inside the organization? Is that...
For within Greenpeace, you mean?
Yeah, yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. The things we went through in the last couple of days has really allowed me to reflect back on Greenpeace and think, okay, so what is the different stakeholders within the organization, the stakeholders that we deal with outside of the organization, and how do you deal with that, and what matters, and therefore how should you apply different styles, listen, act, yeah.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to Greenpeace and you know, maybe you can tell us something in general terms. When it comes to leadership succession and transition, are there any particular issues that Greenpeace will have to grapple with in the next, not just when it comes to the top leader, but kind of senior leadership in general?
Sure. You know, Greenpeace is 40 years young. And in the last 4 decades, therefore, it's gone through a transition. And I think some of our fellow travelers have gone through similar transitions. And it probably by default means a professionalization of the organization. And with that comes leadership as well, in a different way than when, 40 years ago, a couple of very inspiring people stepped onto a boat to bear witness to nuclear testing. So I think where we are today is new people have joined the organization that creates different expectations, younger people who have grown up in a different world than when we established ourselves a couple of decades ago. So succession, understanding you work with people, that they have a career path, is a relatively new thing. And it's something that within the organization we actually take quite seriously. But it's a combination. We don't want to lose the DNA of the organization that comes from our action-orientedness and the people that work with us, be it within the organization or outside of the organization. We don't want to lose what comes from our ships. We have 3 ships, and that's very dear to us, and it has an impact to our DNA. So I think where we are in Greenpeace is to make sure that we keep what is good and what is very true and grassroots within the organization, actually build on from that, being in touch with other members of the movement on the ground in countries, whereas at the same time recognize that in order to lead a complex organization in a complex world, you need different people that lead that. You need leadership, you need different styles. And you don't want to just recruit the people that you met on the ships in the early days. You actually might benefit from new people that have come either from within the sector or outside the sector to reinvent the organization to make sure that we still look ahead, because we're more needed than ever, I believe.
So it's also a combination of cultures of, let's say, primary activism and more professionalized leadership that may come from other sectors, may share the very basic values, but may not have you worked with the same approaches
Absolutely.
before.
Yeah.
It's a difficult balance. Finally, if you look back on the Institute, which we are about to finish, what are, you already mentioned some of the things that you learned in terms of your individual style, as well as getting a further, deeper understanding of the sector. Is there any particular skill or other lesson that you'd like to highlight before we finish the interview?
Of the past couple of days,
yes.
You mean? I overall felt the program was extremely powerful. The key learning for me is really to be cognizant of your own style and what it does to the people that you work with, whether they be internal or whether they be external, and to keep that with you. And that especially in challenging situations, which as humanity will see more and more of, to be able to stand still, step outside of yourself almost and think, okay, hang on, how do I deal with this situation? And then step back into yourself and deal with it. That's really been a very powerful learning in the past few days.
Not easy to do, though, and when you come back into your same institutional environment,
exactly, you need to make sure you keep a mark somewhere in your shower and make sure it stays with me.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this interview. I appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you.